The largest wildfires in the last 7 years are raging across Russia. The authorities are responding with photo sessions and rituals while the fire is devouring entire regions, and federal media are trying to pretend that nothing special is happening. In the meantime, instead of fighting the elements, the funds are being used to wage war against Ukraine, the Center for Countering Disinformation reports. Since the beginning of 2025, Russia has recorded catastrophic forest fires that have already destroyed over 4.3 million hectares, an area comparable to the territory of Denmark. The most critical situation is observed in the Trans-Baikal territory, where the flames have engulfed more than 2.2 million hectares and the scale of the fire continues to grow. Federal Russian media barely cover the situation, and regional publications create a sense of absurdity. Local officials pose against the backdrop of the smoking remains of the forest, pretending to have successfully extinguished the fire, while simultaneously complaining about an acute shortage of equipment and people. Meanwhile, the internet was filled with images of the burnt-out Ogonyok camp, smoke-filled highways, and evacuated villages, while a new children's camp was ceremoniously opened in a neighboring region. Against this backdrop, hundreds of residents of Transbaikalia came out to the river to perform a Buddhist ritual to call for rain in the hope that the sky would be more generous than the state. Experts point out that the resources needed to combat the disaster are being directed towards the war against Ukraine. The Kremlin shows clear indifference to the lives of its citizens as flames continue to engulf new lands. Earlier, media reported that numerous regions of Siberia were hit by a destructive natural disaster. Forest fires are rapidly spreading amid hurricane winds and the dust storms, destroying residential buildings and infrastructure in populated areas. Strong hurricanes and forest fires engulfed the Irkutsk Region, Khakassia and Krasnoyarsk Krai. The fire came close to federal highways and spread to residential buildings. In some settlements, entire villages burned down. Khakassia authorities say that the villages of Kalinino, Sapogovo, Novoeniseika and Ochursky village council suffered the most. In Abakan, Chernogorsk and Ust-Abakansky district, the wind damaged the roofs of residential and social buildings and power outages were recorded. A state of emergency has been declared in the Republic. Ukraine still makes full use of Soviet aircraft, but at the same time integrates them into modern warfare. Aviation expert Anatoly Krapchinsky told Obozrevetel about the difficulties they face in this regard. We still fight on Su-24, Su-27, MiG-29. This is aviation from the Cold War. But thanks to the engineering school, which did not disappear but transformed into war, these veterans became platforms for modern weapons, he noted. So Ukrainian Su-24s, Su-27s, MiG-29s crush Russian positions along the front line, and Russians see this. The expert explained that the Su-24, for example, was adapted from the British Storm Shadow and French Scalp cruise missiles, which changed the depth of the enemy's destruction. The MiG-29 and Su-27, according to him, received the ability to carry American high-precision JDAM-ER air bombs, and this is no longer just protection of the sky, but pinpoint strikes in the rear. Work is also continuing on the integration of anti-radar missiles, such as the AGM-88 HARM, weapons that eat away at enemy air defenses, open the sky to other means of destruction, Krapczynski emphasized. At the same time, there are many problems along the way, the main one being resources, he said. In this case, keeping the park combat ready becomes an art. Soviet technology is not bad. When you have a limited number of engines, spare parts, and even fewer factories capable of servicing it, keeping the fleet combat ready becomes an art. Few people understand that sometimes one flight is half a day of work for engineers with an entire hangar of spare parts, the analyst emphasized. He stressed that using the legacy of the USSR, Ukraine is learning not to be nostalgic for it, but to integrate it into modern warfare. And this is perhaps the most difficult thing, to keep the old in order while gradually moving on to the new. He also explained how close Ukraine is to parity in the sky, emphasizing that parity is not a goal but a minimum from which an advantage begins. Parity in the sky is not just the number of fighters. It is a whole ensemble of means: aviation, air defense, electronic warfare systems, radar, and even kamikaze drones that destroy targets in the depths. Yes, getting F-16s, airborne early warning aircraft like the Saab 340, AEW and C, integrating modern aerial bombs and missiles, and all this will give us a significant boost, the expert says. But true parity, he says, comes not when you have a superplane Wunderwaffe, but when you see airspace as a system where each element covers its area of responsibility. Air defense covers the front and cities, aviation works on targets, and electronic warfare blocks the enemy. Parity is not a state. It is a process. We are not just approaching it, we are fighting for it every day in the conditions of the security that we have. Ukraine is forming a new model of war, and parity is not a goal, but a minimum from which an advantage begins, Krapczynski emphasized.